Well, welcome to another session. Today, I would like to speak to the topic of how to how to prepare for the next few years, um, particularly financially, but more importantly, how to stay alive as we go through what would be um, an interesting but also a challenging economic um, environment. Now, let me start by saying a few things, perhaps to provide some context to today's conversation. One of the things we know about life is the fact that life operates in seasons. We understand that there is a season for everything, and there is a time allotted to said season. We also know that there is a purpose behind every single season and every single time. And so we need not look to books, we need not look to wise sages to understand how life works. We know every day we wake up that daytime follows night time with regularity and with a certain level of frequency and without fail. We also know, depending on where you live, that if I use my place as a useful example, we are 2 days away from the start of winter. Winter will be followed by spring and then summer and then the autumn. You can bet your clock that the seasons will follow in that rhythm. Um, Therefore, in terms of making decisions, it becomes easy to know what to do. Now, we also know that whenever we have a crisis, there will be an opportunity. The inverse is that whenever we've had a boom, generally speaking, there will be some form of a correction. The last 12 years has been unprecedented, irrespective of um, the asset class or the economic area of interest that you might lean towards. The last 2 years, particularly, we have seen a level of boom, spending of money like never before. The next 2 years will not be the same. There will be some correction. And so today's session is almost, this is a preface to put perhaps a title behind what I will be sharing. And I will simply be talking about five different ways to get through the next phase, the next cycle, the next season. Now, one of the things we do know is that no one can predict the future. What we try to do is we look at what I call tea leaves. There are things that happen that I call foreshadowing events, things that give you an idea of where we are. In every cycle, it's very hard to predict or to state where exactly we are in that cycle. What I try to do is to make some observations by looking around to the present. I do not try to predict the future. I simply say, based on knowledge of the past and the seasons of life, based on the behaviors of people in the present, based on the environment, based on emotions and psychology around the market, what does that tell me? In other words, do the tea leaves say? With that information, I can prepare for the immediate present. I do that by simply, you could say, extrapolating without making huge predictive inferences. I'm inferring from the present, extrapolating that inference to the immediate present without going too far into the future, because that's when errors of both omission and commission tend to come into the picture. The next 2 years, certainly in the short term, however that phase lasts, 18 months, 16 months, 2 years, 3 years, they will not be the same as the last 2 years. We've had a boom, we will have a correction, because that's how life works. The question, therefore, becomes, how do you prepare to ensure that you can stay alive, that you can go through the fire without loss of enthusiasm? How do you ensure that you have the fortitude, the ability, the philosophy, and the lifestyle to get you through the difficult phase and get you into what will be the recovery phase? 2 years ago, I started sharing such ideas about how to deal with what was supposed to be year 2020 and year 2021 and year 2022, which is the present year of our Lord. In many ways, I hate to say this, but some of the strategies that I recommended 2+ years ago are not longer applicable today. You have to move with the times. We are going into an inflection point, a pivotal point, and the strategies that worked 2 years ago for the boom will not be the same for the correction. So the question therefore becomes, what do I do? Now, here are some recommendations. Now, these recommendations will not apply to everyone. So cherry pick as you wish. If it works for you, then apply them. If you think it might work, then apply them. Number one, more than anything and more than any time over the past 2 decades, it will become a lot more important to learn to spend less than you earn, or to put it in a different way, to live within your means. Now, what we know is that if your outgoings exceed your incomings, you will always be in a deficit position. In order to be in a surplus position, you have to reduce your outgoings, keeping your incoming constant, and therefore you can have a net, what we call a net positive present value. Alternatively, you can increase your incoming to a level that exceeds your outgoing, whether that outgoing is maintained, reduced, or even increased. But providing your incoming exceeds your outgoings, then from an economic perspective, you should have a surplus. So strategy number one will be for you to spend less than you earn. Now, this has been the golden principle since the beginning of time. However, there was a twist to that principle. Generally speaking, over many years, what was discovered was that poor people, people that struggle through life, they earn money, they spend on their general expenses. What they have left, they save. Most of the time, especially in difficult periods, such as we are going into, what they're able to save is very little. Therefore, they have little left as what I'll call surplus investments or surplus cash, surplus assets to be able to build for the future. Wealthy people, on the other hand, rich people, on the other hand, applied a slightly different strategy. Same equation, but they would earn, the first thing they did was assume that they had to pay a tax, an investment tax. So they would deduct a certain amount for investments. So they would earn, invest first, spend, and then if there is anything left, then they can save. That philosophy and that ideology, whilst it seems quite simple, was a profound approach to building wealth. It simply meant that you paid yourself first. Before you paid the rent, the mortgage, before you paid the utility bills, before you put food in your mouth, before you actually took yourself to a nice restaurant, that you took a percentage of all you earned and paid that to your future self. The Richest Man in Babylon was a book that came up with a reference. A part of all you earn is yours to keep. Pay yourself first. That principle will be required more than ever over the next 2 months. So principle number one is you're going to have to spend less than you earn. Now, how you achieve that, I leave to you. Number two, whilst it might come as maybe a natural follow-up to say you should invest your money, I would go against the grain, and my recommendation to you would be do not invest. This is not the time to invest, particularly if you are what I would call an amateur investor. If you have a full-time job and not dedicating enough time to study in markets, assets, investment opportunities, demographic changes, macro trends, if you're not spending time and you don't understand economics very well, this is not the right time to invest. This is the right time to spend. And let me clarify the reference I mean when I talk about spending. The instinct we have is that we want to save so we can invest. I would say over the next 2 years to think more strategically. Think like a business. Businesses are going through very, very difficult, challenging times. In the short term, those who will prevail, and this is something that happens in business, whenever there is an economic crisis or uncertainty, businesses react rather than respond. They react as follows. They think, what is the first item we can slash from our spending budget? Usually, research and development, capital expenditure, investing for growth for the future is the first item that is slashed. They think from the perspective of we need to reduce our spending in order to stay afloat, without realizing that at the end of the season, there will be a new season, and those who are prepared for the next season, whilst being in the present season, are usually the ones who thrive over the long term. In the same way, you are a business. You are a corporation. You are a business. You are the chief executive officer of your company, you being the company. Interestingly, you are also the chief financial officer of your business, the CFO. You are the chief information officer, the CIO. You are the CIO, this is a second reference, the chief investment officer of your business. You are the chief health officer of your business. Now, you can see that I can keep coming up with titles in which responsibility comes back to you. As a business, the question should be, what value or service am I bringing to the marketplace that will guarantee, not that would ensure, that would guarantee that I amaze my customers? That my customers say, I would have to be stupid to go to another customer or to go to another company for services. I want to come to you. Now that simply means that you have to be able to meet the customer's need where you meet them, which is in the present. But you also have to plan for the customer's unspoken needs so that you're able to meet the company at the point where they pivot into the future. Now, this simply means when I talk about spending, you're going to have to spend money, time, resources on yourself. I'll give you a few things to keep in mind. You allocate a certain amount for your investment portfolio or for your investment pot. You spend whatever's left, you can save. I'm suggesting that rather than investing your portfolio into real assets or financial assets, rather than investing in digital assets, you think of applying a different way of viewing the world, which is to anticipate what the world might need. You invest that in what I call your human capital. Generally speaking, wealth is created in several ways. At the core base is you exchange time for money. In order to exchange time for money, you need human capital. The second is where you invest money to create more money. And you use a derivative of money, and that could be in the form of investment or assets. It could also be things where you don't own the real asset itself, but you own the right to the assets, perhaps contingent assets. So money working to create wealth or to create more money is one approach. Time working, using sweat, hard labor to create money is a second approach. What I am suggesting is you're going to have to take some of the money you've earned and reinvest that back. And I use the word spend, but reinvest that back in yourself. Number one, in terms of areas to invest, your education. We will come through the challenging period ahead, but there will always be disrupted and disruptors in a market. So think about yourself and answer the question, am I going to be one of the disrupted people, or am I going to be the disruptor? A disruptor is someone who actually is able to meet whatever the client needs and anticipate that need in advance and bring to the market a service for that need, and in most cases even convince the client that this is the need for the present moment. That would only come through education, through reinvesting in yourself so that you're prepared for where we will be. Now we know about the story of Joseph, where he predicts that there will be 7 years of famine and seven years of prosperity and 7 years of famine. And what to do in between both seasons will decide how the experience is felt. But even before the first season begins, how you prepare for the first season in anticipation of the second season is key. So, number one, you spend money in your education. Now, if you are a company and you are the asset, you have to understand that you have a body, you have a mind or an intellect, and you have a spirit. Your spirit is self-renewing, but there are things you have to do to ensure that you replenish and refuel yourself. Now, let me start with the physical side. Most people think about themselves not so much like prized horses. If you've ever owned or if you've ever been around people who have prized horses, some of these horses, they're treated better than human beings. They're fed well, they're catered for, much more so than the owners. The reason being, they're prized, what I call biological assets. You can have a horse worth millions. Why? Because it's a prized elite asset. Therefore, you invest in the asset. In the same way, think about yourself like a prized horse. Your physical health is primacy. In order for you to compete, assuming sadly you fall within the category of people who will have to work to earn money, the next 2 years will be challenging from the perspective that your health will be called into question. It will be tested. There will be so much happening. There will be so much uncertainty. Fear will come into the picture. Doubt, fear, concern, worry. And if you're not careful about making sure that you stand guard at the gate to your physical well-being as gatekeepers, you're going to find that you're like a sponge absorbing all the negativity from the outside, and therefore internalizing all the, you guys might say, the dire things happening around you. You have to invest in yourself. So I would say, in addition to investing in your education, which is your mind, to get smarter, to become sharper, to be better in thinking, to be better in solving problems, to be better in being able to understand, perspectives, read emotions, identify opportunities, you need to invest in yourself. And I would recommend, this is something people would perhaps not understand the value. The next 2 years will be the time for you to increase the quality of food you eat so you can enhance your well-being. Like a priced horse, you need to be investing in yourself. In a recession, people tend to cut back, like companies, cut back on spending. My recommendation is that you double down, but this time around on quality spending. I think about a year ago, the dates could be wrong, but I know I suggested this 2 years ago plus, but reminded a few people that I know about a year ago that it was important for people to, before the inflation rises began, at the time inflation was still being projected at 2%. And I said, one of the best things you can do is get yourself a chest freezer, a large chest freezer. And if you can, buy a cow, buy a whole lamb. If you want to, buy some deers, but buy the normal livestock that you would normally eat for the whole year. And think about it from the perspective of you pulling forward all your monthly spending into 1 month. So the present value of all the future payments that would have been made for beef, for pork, for lamb, bring that forward. Invest in a huge chest freezer, but rather than buy on a weekly basis meat that is not necessarily good meat, think about buying an entire cow from the best farms. Have it cut into pieces. You would get much more. My estimation at the time was about 10 times more in value, but also 10 times more in quantity if you buy in bulk. But you also protect yourself from rising costs or inflationary costs. So let me use that example, which is to say, you need to have good quality food. A lot of the meat sold in the supermarkets are not really good quality. Except you've been on a farm and you've been around farmers. It's hard to understand that, like a prized horse. All horses are not the same. All cows are not the same. All sheep are not the same. The venison you buy or the deers are not all the same. The chicken you buy, the pigs, are not all the same. But if you buy good quality, then you're nourished, because rather than eat quantity, you're eating quality. That then ensures that you, being the prized horse, your peak performance is guaranteed. Another thing to spend money on in addition to your education and your food, will be your physique, your body. And here I would recommend very, very, very strongly that you will have to increase over the next 2 years both the quantity and the quality, both of your time and your resources that you put into anything that enhances your well-being. Going to the gym, joining a sporting club, in addition to eating well, anything to improve your well-being. Sleep is very important. Sleep should not be compromised. So whatever you can do to enhance the quality of your sleep, join a club. Let the club be one that has perhaps a sauna, a steam room, something to help you detox, especially in the challenging times, something to allow your body to rest and recover, so that when you get home and you have 8 hours of sleep, you wake up ready to absorb whatever the world throws in your direction. Rest, recovery. These are things to spend money on. So education, your physique or your body, sleep, any lifestyle activity that enhances your performance as a person or enhances your lifestyle as a person. Now, let me finish by saying something. Again, the timing of this final position on spending may not be the best. About 2 years ago, I used an example speaking with a smaller group, and I said, almost 10 years ago, more than a decade ago, I bought some perfumes. These were Tom Ford perfumes. At the time, they had just come out. One of those was Amber Absolute. And I suggested in the group that at the time when I bought the perfumes, I was paying £300 for a bottle of perfume. Most people were paying £30 for a bottle of perfume. People were making the mistake of viewing the perfume that I purchased or that was on sale on absolute pounds in terms of cost, which is the wrong way to look at things. This £300 bottle of perfume had 250 ml in quantity, which meant, technically speaking, I was only buying, adjusted per ml, I was paying something in the region of about £1.50 or less. But I was getting the best quality of that brand. It was a Tom Ford brand, the number of bottles that I had purchased. The average perfume that was selling for 30, 40, 50 pounds had roughly about 50, the £300 bottle of perfume had about 250 ml, just in case I didn't say that. So I was paying about £1.50. If you do the numbers properly, perhaps £1.15 or £1.25, doesn't matter. The average person was buying perfumes that were less superior, or let me use the word less branded, and for £50 they would get, in some cases, 50 ml for £50, which, if you did the sums, what you found was that what they were paying for per ml was significantly much more than what I was paying. So if you take £50 and divide it by 50 ml, what you find is, for the quality of perfume you were getting and the price you were paying per ml, you were getting a significantly less quality for a number of reasons. Anyone who's used either Roja perfumes or Tom Ford perfumes will recognize that these are perfumes you use very, very gently. The alcohol content is very high. One spray or two, and that is more than enough, sometimes just one. That will keep you going sometimes for 2 days. Those who were wearing, and I used to be one of those who would wear perfumes advertised in supermarkets and in shops that were cheaper, you would have to use so much more quantity. So although you were getting a 50 ml liter, you had to use about 6 or 7 times the amount per outing. I use that example to show that you can get good quality. And 2 years ago, I said, all the perfumes that I bought, they are still in use today. So after 10 years, the one thing I had protected myself from was inflation cost. Even at 4%, because I had checked in 2020 what the cost of the same perfume would be, I simply looked at what would be the compounded growth in price, taking into account the price in 2020 and the price in 2010. And it worked out that just on a cost basis, the cost had increased by 4% every year. So I had technically saved myself 4% every single year by buying good quality, buying expensive, and then using the perfumes correctly. The point of this is to say that over the next 2 months, most companies will have huge cash flow issues, partly as a result of over-investing during the summer in inventories. So you're going to see a lot of sales because companies are looking to flush out because they assumed that the supply chain issues will last and may be progressive. And so they double booked and double paid for huge inventories. That is causing a lot of cash flow restrictions. And so some companies would have to release some of those inventories at discounted prices in order to ensure that they can sustain the business. What that means is that you're going to have the opportunity, especially over the Christmas period, to buy very good quality products or commodities or items at good prices. This is not a time for you to say, no, I'm going to save. You should think about getting the best quality, whether that be shoes, belts, jeans, wristwatches, things you use on a daily basis to present yourself to the marketplace and to make your presence known. You're going to need to invest in such items which will ensure that over the next 3 years, you do not need to go back to the marketplace to buy new things. At inflation rates, in some cases, as high as 20%, depending on the product, you cannot go back to the marketplace every year to buy the same thing over and over again. Quality, and don't think from the position of absolute pounds or cost. Think about it from the perspective of quality. Now, number 3, and I understand that I've gone much longer than I would have wanted to. Over the next 2 years, I would like you to think about how you can increase your value. I'll give you one recommendation. You should be working 20% harder than you did a year ago. It's very easy to work out what that would translate to. Most people work Monday to Friday, 5 days in a week. 20% of 5 days is 1 extra day. Most people work 40 hours per week. You should be working 50 hours as a minimum per week, especially over the next 2 years. Your competition will be the person sitting next to you. Your competition will be the person sitting away from you in China, Dubai, the Middle East, somewhere in Africa, or perhaps somewhere in the United Kingdom. There's a big difference. We're going to see, for the first time, a crisis within the white-collar job. Now, we had the blue-collar job 10, 15 years ago, when people complained, particularly almost at the same time when China came into the WTO, the World Trade Organization. We had people complain that all the good jobs would go to China and that blue-collar jobs will be outsourced. And such events took place. Most people didn't care because it affected just the blue-collar people. I hate to say this. Lockdown was something we hoped and wished never happened. But what it did, it introduced us to new ways of working. Companies have then realized, well, we don't have to employ people from the same regional jurisdiction as we have our business. We can employ people from anywhere, providing they do the job. So nowadays you have service jobs at prices where over the next 2 years, as companies cut costs, they will think about innovative ways to reduce their capital expenditure, but more importantly, their operating expenses. And that would include letting go of some people, finding similar people who are just as enthusiastic about working, but will cost them much less. People who are traveling these days, people have said, listen, I don't have to be in London. I don't have to live in central London, paying half my salary on rental accommodation. I can move to Spain. I can move to Portugal. I can pay a fifth of what I paid in London, which means from a competition point of view, I can offer my services to the marketplace at 10, 15, 20% discount to my competition, which puts me in a strategic advantage. Now you are going to have to compete at that level. There are two ways. Number one, you apply what we call the law of averages. If the person will work for 40 hours, you work 20% more than they will. If they would work for 50, you work 20% more than they will. All things remaining equal, assuming both of you are just as competent, the person who puts in 20% more will be drawn to the right people, and therefore the law of compensation will work for that person. Quite easy. So you should be working 20% more on a weekly basis in your current job. And for most people, the idea of having a 2-day break, now even depending on whether you believe the authors of the story, even God didn't rest for 2 days. He didn't. The idea that you will be resting for 2 days in an economic crisis where your job is not guaranteed, or even if it's guaranteed, as we can see with unions, where you risk the long-term position, should be something you avoid. Before the market demands an extra 20%, give the market an extra 20%. And number 4, the next 2 years will be a time when you must get comfortable with breaking the rules. Now bear in mind, I haven't said break the laws. The laws should never be broken. When I mean break the rules, some of you are just too good morally, ethically, and that's the reason why you lose. You're not willing to bend the rules or break the rules. Here is a word I will give you, a sentence perhaps, a quote that I hope you keep hold of. Ask for forgiveness and stop asking for permission. Many of you have been raised to color within the lines, to play the game the way it's been played for 30, 40 years. Now look where it's got you. This country is broke, we're bankrupt, we have idiots leading us as politicians, making decisions for you and our children, and you're still coloring within the lines. You're going to have to break some of the rules. Stop waiting for permission. Start getting creative. Think about ways in which you can bring something to the marketplace. Stop over-analyzing. If you have an idea, the next 2 years, even when people say to you that is the worst time to bring forward a new business, that is when you should be bringing the business into the marketplace. Don't follow the rules. History has shown that every time there has been a progress in humankind, progress has not come from within. It hasn't been the incumbent people who have created progress. Progress tends to come from the rebels, from without, from people trying things and falling into positions for which they never believed or even tried. But the point is that they were willing to take risks. They were willing to go places that other people said you can't go. They were willing to say things that most people said were fallacies and heresies and not to be spoken. They were willing to do whatever it took. The question I have for you is, over the next 2 years, are you going to be willing to do whatever it takes? Or will you be one of those who keeps saying, I'm waiting for God's plan? Now, forgive me, God is speaking to you now, and God is saying very clearly, you make the plan. You bring the plan to me. You execute the plan, and I'll back you up. Stop waiting for God to send a messenger to tell you your plan is right. Take your gift, take your skill, take your talent to the market, give it to the market. If the market rejects it, course correct, improve, modify, go back to the marketplace. If the market corrects, now here's the key thing, the market always gives you feedback. We hear about the old saying, it's not my father, it's not my mother, it's me, your Lord. It's going to have to be you, which means break the rules, respect the laws, get out of your comfort zone, stop being a big baby, stop being a bitch, just do it. The Nike slogan says it all. You do it until it gets done. If you come across obstacles, keep doing it. If you find things are hard for you, great, keep doing it. Go from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. And along the way, break the rules. All that matters is the scoreboards. But keep in mind, I'm not saying be immoral. I'm not saying for you to do things that are unethical. And certainly I'm not saying you should do things that are illegal. No, I'm simply saying break the rules. Enough with conforming. The next 2 years will be about survival. You have to survive. Now, number 5, and I close. Be greedy. Be greedy in the sense that think about your dreams and think about your purpose and think about your potential. And let's just imagine you and I, at some point in the future, will stand side by side and we will be asked about our goals and our dreams. And the question will be a simple one. In the time allotted to you on earth, what did you do? What did you do with said time? Recognizing that the response will be void or adjusted for excuses. What would be your response? Were you hungry? Were you greedy? Were you determined? By being greedy, I'm saying get creative. Become dissatisfied with where you are. I use greed because it's something that fuels the human imagination. But when I use greedy, I'm talking about self-interest. Now, selfishness, I do not recommend, but self-interest, that is the fuel that has created everything in the world. The idea that you put yourself first and say, I want to be successful. I want to stay above water. I want to go through the next 2 years of economic crisis, and I want to come out ready, willing, and able. How do I get myself prepared to be in that position? One advice is you have to be dissatisfied with where you are. You have to be dissatisfied with the life you've had. In other words, you have to die to the present self that you are in preparation for the rebirth of being born into a new self. Like a caterpillar, you have to die to become a butterfly. Being greedy means that you say, I am going to do whatever it takes. Now, in summary, 5 simple things that you can do over the next 2 years. Now, remember, I'm not saying that it will be easy. I'm not even suggesting that these principles, when applied, will be smooth sailing. No. What I am saying is that the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience that got you to where you are today, there is so much headwind coming your way and my way that knowledge will not be sufficient to get us to and through the next 2 years. Those who play by the same set of rules, who were content, those who refuse to work hard, those who continue to spend more than they earn, those who refuse to invest in themselves, might find themselves in a place whereby the headwind of uncertainty and risks and problems and challenges may be too much, that it overwhelms you. What I'm saying is, why don't you get ready? Now, let me leave you with a quote. The quote says that all men, obviously, and women are created equal. But some work harder in the pre-season game, so that when the season starts, they're throwing the ball as though they were born with this talent and with this gift. No, there's the people who woke up at 5 every morning and spent 2 hours practicing, preparing, perfecting their skill, their gifts. There's the people who spend time studying the market. I would hope that you would be one of such people. Whatever your dreams might be, recognize that there's something that will come in between you and that future. And that obstacle is the way. You have to go through the obstacle, go around the obstacle, go underneath the obstacle, go beneath, besides the obstacle, but you have to get through to the other side. Now, how you achieve that will be entirely up to you. But the one thing you can't say is that there were no people, or there was no person who came to you and said, prepare. The season of famine is coming. After the season of famine will be the